My dear brothers and sisters, the love and blessings of the Mother and Sri Aurobindo to all of you from Sri Aurobindo Ashram, Delhi branch. The session today is titled Unity, Horizontal and Vertical. A very simple title and yet very enigmatic, and you'll understand where it comes from. It comes from one of the sentences in the chapter in the Life Divine. This chapter is chapter 5 in book 1 of the Life Divine, more or less at the beginning of Life Divine. And the chapter is titled Destiny of the Individual. Now, Indian spiritual philosophy has a way of encapsulating things, great, imperishable, absolute truths, or rather truth, because there's only one truth which can be considered absolute, imperishable, everlasting, and unchangeable. And that wide, deep and high truth, the one truth which incorporates all other truths, Indian spiritual philosophy encapsulates in just one short sentence: all is one. All that exists is that one. If it is not that one, it does not exist, to put it in the opposite way. And then when it elaborates upon it, that it does in another 3 very short sentences: one in all in one, all as one. Now, while the highest truth is that simple, the human intellect has a way of elaborating upon it, and in the process of elaborating upon it, it can go in different directions, emphasizing one or the other aspect of this truth, and then mistaking that elaboration for the whole truth. That happens because basically we are born in a state of ignorance. And from there, we try to go towards knowledge, because that urge to go towards that knowledge, that highest truth, has also been planted in us. And probably human beings are unique among the creation which has this urge, and also the capacity to respond to this urge meaningfully. So it is this urge to go away from ignorance, to come out of this ignorance, the darkness of ignorance, and move towards knowledge. Or as Soumya was singing a few minutes back, Kusum Kalisa Mera Manas Vikasit Karma. Prayer to the Mother, I am like a flower bud, and please help me bloom. So starting with that state of gross underdevelopment, going towards the human destiny, which is the title of this chapter in the Life Divine, is what man's mission, man's purpose in life probably is, because human being is the only creature who has this sort of an urge and the capacity. But then, as I was saying, the human intellect has a way of elaborating upon it, sometimes in a lopsided manner, and that has led to at least 2 types of fallacies, which Aurobindo calls the 2 negations. One is the denial of the materialist. That is, the materialist considers the senses that we have to be our gateway to the truth. So whatever cannot be perceived by the senses, and at the most to that we may add the capacities of the intellect. So whatever does not fit into this framework of the sensory perception and its further interpretation in terms of logic and past experience is dismissed as something which does not exist. And such people often call themselves rationalists, although they cannot really give any good reason why the sensory perception and our mental abilities can be the outer limit of the truth itself. Can truth not be wider than that? That is a question which probably they can't easily answer, and yet they feel that, well, that is it. So that is the denial of the materialist. And denying the all-pervasive presence of the divine in each individual, and for that matter in all creation, is again like what Soumya was saying, Koop Nir Vina, Mandir Diye Vina. So it is to deny the existence of water in the well, or the lighted lamp in the temple. So that is what it is like. So you are denying something very essential and vital by denying the all-pervasive presence of the denial and of all-pervasive presence of the divine, and denying its presence in the material creation. But then the one who pursues this question seriously as to what the ultimate truth is, sometimes does arrive at that sort of an experience which makes the person feel that, well, the truth is really vast, it is indefinable, it cannot be confined within any limits, and therefore it cannot be this plant, it cannot be this animal, it cannot be this human being, it cannot be this, it cannot be that, it is much bigger than that. So when the person says it is not this, it is not this, it is not that, neti, 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 then the person is actually not really denying the presence of the divine in that. The person is only acknowledging our limitations of perception. But all the same, this neti neti experience can be taken to such extremes that the person starts feeling that, well, what I see and perceive is in fact only an illusion, and actually the ultimate reality is neither in this nor in that, and since it is neither this nor that, the ultimate reality, therefore it is not really something worth taking much interest in, and that is what leads to illusionism or the Mayavad. So it's all Maya, it is an illusion. Yes, it is an illusion, true, yes, in the sense that an illusion is something which appears different from what it is. What it appears to be is a plant or an animal, but its deepest reality is the divine, which we don't see easily in it. And therefore, what we see is different from what it is at the deepest level, but all the same, to put on that form is also something that the divine has chosen to do. So it's the divine which has chosen to manifest itself in that form, and therefore we are actually denying one form of the same, of which we are acknowledging another form, the unmanifest. So this is what Sri Aurobindo has called the refusal of the ascetic. So on one hand is the denial of the materialist who denies the existence of the divine in the material universe, and on the other hand is the refusal of the ascetic who refuses to acknowledge the reality of the manifestation. Now, which of these two is more dangerous? One is a state of ignorance, the denial of the materialist, and the other comes from deep knowledge, experiential in nature, knowledge which has come from a level much higher than the senses and the intellect, suprasensory knowledge, and therefore it is in fact knowledge of a very high order, but all the same it can lead to that sort of a fallacy. Now, which of these two is more dangerous? Isha Upanishad says the one who is ignorant, that is the materialist, yes, is in a state of darkness, but the one who has knowledge is, or at least can be, in a still much greater state of darkness. Why? Because the person who has this knowledge feels that, well, I have seen the ultimate truth, I have experienced it, I have perceived it, what else can be there beyond it? And therefore, this person has the smug satisfaction of really knowing the highest truth, and therefore does not even have the curiosity to go beyond it. He doesn't want to go beyond it. But the one who is in a state of ignorance may sometimes have that awakening which makes this person aware of his ignorance and may want to go beyond it. So at least there is hope. Whereas the one who has settled down in a state of knowledge, but at the same time knowledge which has been distorted to reject the manifestation as another form of the same divine which he has accepted, this person who has this knowledge, because he settled down in this complacent attitude, has in fact is beyond redemption, and therefore he is in a still greater state of darkness. Now, Sri Aurobindo, as you know, he has always looked at things in a very integral manner, and therefore has always emphasized seeing the divine in the manifestation as well as seeing it beyond it. And this is not something new. It is Vedantic knowledge, it's Upanishadic knowledge. In fact, it's Upanishadic knowledge which is the root of the different schools of Vedanta. And it's embodied in this popular mantra, Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevava Shishyate. So this is Purna, that is Purna. The one which has come out of the Purna is Purna. And if you take away something from the Purna, the remainder is also Purna. So that the divine is here and the divine is there. From the divine arose everything. And when you take something out of the divine, the remainder is also complete. So, or the divine. Now, this is something that is all is one and all can be seen as one, is something which is not new, but same time there came a phase starting about 2000 years ago and became very prominent about 1000 years ago in this country when we came to develop a dichotomy between worldly life and spiritual life, and also a dichotomy between the manifest and the unmanifest, and started feeling that, well, all that we see is basically an illusion. It was only one step away from illusion to see it as a set of falsehood, and therefore neglect material life. And it was this neglect of material life which led to our degeneration, and that's why Sri Aurobindo had to apply that corrective, and it has been brought out very emphatically in this particular chapter of the Life Divine. In fact, throughout you find in this emphasis, but this chapter is again a very emphatic assertion of the integral view, and brings out the fallacies of the illusionist view of looking at the highest truth, illusionist way of looking at the material universe. It is a criticism of that view, but same time it is a healthy criticism. It is a reasoned criticism, and it is a criticism which is constructive in nature, as you can expect from anything that Sri Aurobindo writes. So now, Sri Aurobindo starts with this chapter with the progress from the state of ignorance to the state of knowledge, and he calls this a state of progressive comprehension, which means it's not a one-time event, it's a process. But same time, any further progression on this path does not mean that we forget what we realized before that. And that is how we will be able to have an integral view. So that's why I said we climb ill if we forget our base, which means we start from the material base, that also is the divine, we should not forget it. And as we go from there further to a more comprehensive realization, more comprehensive perception of the truth, we should not forget what was realized before that. So the base should always be retained, and the previous realizations have to be incorporated in the subsequent realizations. In this type of an integral view, he says that corrects two exaggerations. Now again, Sri Aurobindo's humility as well as precision. He does not call it two errors or two blunders. He just calls it two exaggerations. Now, what are those two exaggerations which result from the refusal of the ascetic? One is recoil from physical life. That is, if you feel that the physical life is only an illusion, the ultimate reality is something which is very different and can be pursued by rejecting it, or in fact treating this physical life as an encumbrance, as an obstacle on the path to realization, then it leads to a recoil. But then if you take an integral view, if you keep incorporating the base from where you started, because we start from the base, we start with our minds, and the one which takes us progressively towards that higher truth can itself not be forgotten and rejected and neglected in the process. So that type of a recoil from physical life comes from leaving the base behind and getting lost in the uh, realization which seems more and more sublime and outside the sphere of the material manifestation. So this recoil from physical life is an exaggeration which results from perceiving a certain part of the truth and exaggerating it. So he calls it an exaggeration. The other type of exaggeration which happens as a result of this is that the individual as well as the universe in fact get belittled. How is the individual belittled? Because if you do not consider the individual as a part of the universe, as a part of that divine, then you are seeing the individual also as something which is less than what it really is. So instead of aham brahmasmi, that is, I am the divine itself, we start considering it as only a limited part of the divine, a part of the divine which is itself an illusion, and so on. And it also belittles the universe because the universe is also seen as something which is an illusion. It is distinct from the highest truth, which is unmanifest. So it belittles both the individual and the universe. So all this can be avoided through the integral view if we do not forget the base and realize that from where we start, that itself is also the divine. All is the divine. The manifestation is also divine. But then the manifestation is not the limit of the divine. The divine is infinite. The manifestation is finite. And therefore, the highest reality extends even beyond the manifestation. So that is how we can see the divine at all the three levels: in the individual, in each individual part of the creation, in the universal, that is the entire creation, and the transcendent, that is, which is beyond the manifestation. And all these we can see as one, and that is what truly Advait, or all is one, is about. That is, there are no two, there is just one. Now, then Sri Aurobindo says that this really does not change the relationship between the individual and the creator, between the individual and the creation. It only widens and puts into proper perspective both the in view and the out view of things, which means that we get a better view of what is within, and we also get a better view of what is outside, which is equally divine. Now, this point I'll read out a little from this chapter. The continuation of the illumined individual in the action of the world is an imperative need of the world play. So, it is true that the world is a play, it's a game, it's a leela of the divine, but at the same time, the person who is truly illumined, who has now this comprehensive in view and out view, which means it's not only the in view but also the out view, that is the way he looks at the surroundings, the way he looks at the rest of the creation. This out view makes sure that he continues to participate in the world play. So the continuation of the illumined individual in the action of the world is an imperative need of the world play. It not only continues to do it, it is an imperative need, it is essential. If his inexorable removal through the very act of illumination is the law, that is, if the act of illumination leads to his removal from the participation in the play, then the world is condemned to remain eternally the scene of unredeemed darkness, death, and suffering. So the one who is illumined, if he distances himself from the world, then the rest of the world remains as it is, that is, in a state of darkness, death, and suffering. But all the same, this type of individual salvation has been the result of, has been the mission as a result of this illusionist way of looking at things. But then from this, who is it that really benefits? And on that again, Aurobindo has talked quite a bit. But before we go there, let's see. Who then profits by this escape? So, by this type of an escape into that world of world in which the individual is saved, but the rest of the world remains as it is, who really benefits from it? Not the individual, because, well, who then profits by this escape? Not the Supreme Self. The Divine itself does not benefit. The Divine has nothing to gain. For it is supposed to be always and inalienably free, still, silent and pure and complete in itself. Who benefits from it? Not the world, for that remains constantly in the bondage and is not freed by the escape of any individual soul from the universal illusion. So as we saw that the world remains as it is. But does the individual benefit? Well, maybe to some extent, but then why even that does not happen? That is what is interesting here, and this comes is both very emphatic and has a subtle humor in it. It is the individual soul itself which effects its supreme good by escaping from the sorrow and the division into the peace and the bliss. There would seem to be some kind of reality of the individual soul as distinct from the world and from the supreme, even in the event of freedom and illumination. So if the soul alienates itself from the rest of the world, it is, instead of treating everything as one, is still creating a sense of separation between this soul and all the rest, which is in fact contrary to the very idea of all being one. But for the illusionist, the individual soul is an illusion and non-existent except in the inexplicable mystery of Maya. Therefore, we arrive at the escape of an illusory non-existent soul. So the individual itself also a part of the Maya, and if we treat the Maya as something which is unreal and does not exist, then this non-existent soul escapes from what? It escapes from the illusory non-existent bondage in an illusory non-existent world as the supreme good which that non-existent soul has to pursue. So this is the subtle humor that I was talking about. So for the illusionist, the individual soul is so the one who is apparently liberated himself from all the bondage of this world through knowledge. What sort of how we can look at it from the logical point of view? We arrive at the escape of an illusory non-existent soul from an illusory non-existent bondage in an illusory non-existent world as the supreme good which that non-existent soul has to pursue. So really nobody benefits. The divine doesn't benefit. The divine has nothing to gain or lose. The world does not benefit because the world stays in the same state of darkness, and even the individual does not benefit because it only leads to this sort of a confusion. Who has escaped and from what has he escaped? The one who has escaped is an illusion. From what he has escaped is also an illusion. So therefore Aurobindo says we have to escape by a confusion out of a confusion. So this is what the result is. We escape by a confusion out of a confusion. And what in fact he brings out is, it represents is the supreme act of egoism. The individual soul can only cut the knot of ego by a supreme act of egoism, an exclusive attachment to its own individual salvation, which amounts to an absolute assertion of its separate existence in Maya. So he considers himself entirely separate from the rest of the Maya. Rest is all Maya, but I am in some way real, and therefore I need to escape, and therefore that I should escape somehow is a supreme act of egoism. Which means that he has been able to cut the knot of ego, which he considers a part of this Maya, which has to be overcome and transcended, he uses the same ego to cut this knot. Not K-N-O-T, knot. So we have to escape by a confusion. Out of a confusion, the individual soul can only cut the knot of ego by a supreme act of egoism, an exclusive attachment to its own individual salvation, which amounts to an absolute assertion of its separate existence in Maya. We are led to regard the other souls as if they were figments of our mind and their salvation unimportant. So they were all imaginary because they were all illusory. The rest were all illusory and they are unimportant to us. Their salvation is not important. Our soul alone, as if it were entirely real, and its salvation the one thing that matters. So I am an exception, the rest is all illusion, all the other souls are an illusion, but I was real and I have escaped. I come to regard my personal escape from bondage as real, while other souls who are equally myself remain behind in the bondage. So this is an extremely emphatic as well as slightly humorous assertion as to what can be the ultimate consequences of this type of an illusionist view carried to its logical conclusions. So you can see Sri Aurobindo here at his rational best. This is where Sri Aurobindo humbles us and makes us realize that even when we think that we are very rational, how irrational we are. And what sort of absurdities our rational point of view can lead to. And that absurdity becomes Sri Aurobindo's humor. Now let's turn to the line or a sentence from which this expression comes, horizontal and vertical. And if one can look at it very simply, it would be that horizontal unity or realization of horizontal oneness is realizing our being one with the rest of the creation, because that is what we can see around. Consider ourselves just a drop in an ocean and a part of a vast ocean, maybe a distinct drop, but all the same not as distinct as we imagine ourselves to be, with similar strengths and weaknesses as the rest of the drops in the ocean. Now let's come to that paragraph in which this horizontal and vertical unity has been talked about. The liberation of the individual soul, that is a true liberation, not that liberation of the type which leads to the liberation of the non-illusory soul from the non-illusory bondage, but a true liberation in which the material base from which we started has not been forgotten, but incorporated in that higher realization. So the liberation of the individual soul is therefore the keynote of the definite divine action. It is the primary divine necessity and the pivot on which all else turns. It is the point of light at which the intended complete self-manifestation in the many begins to emerge. But the liberated soul extends its perception of unity horizontally as well as vertically. Its unity with the transcendent one is incomplete without its unity with the cosmic many. So this is the essence of horizontal and vertical. Its unity with the transcendent one, that is the one which transcends manifestation, is the unity, the vertical unity. And this is itself is incomplete without its unity with the cosmic many, that is the many who are a part of the cosmos, that is horizontal unity. So one is incomplete without the other. Its unity with the transcendent one is incomplete without its unity with the cosmic many. The unity with the transcendent one is the vertical unity, and the unity with the cosmic many is the horizontal unity. Now, all this may sound very good, but then one may say that we are in a state of ignorance, and therefore, by and large, still we tend to organize our lives around multiplicity rather than unity. And that is because that is what we can relate to most easily. That's in keeping with our ordinary everyday experience. And in the phenomenal world, that also seems to be a necessity to behave like that. So how can we, what practical significance does it have? Does it have any practical significance? And how can we ascend to this higher truth without at the same time completely disengaging ourselves or alienating ourselves from the phenomenal world? Now, let's try and see how we can move towards a better realization of the horizontal unity. Now, the starting point for many of us can be theoretical knowledge, the type of knowledge that we have gained, and faith in that knowledge, belief in that knowledge. Faith and belief are slightly different, but the two can supplement each other. Faith is something at the level of the heart. Intuitively feel that, well, there is truth in it, and even if I can't grasp it fully, I trust those who have perceived it, that is the rishis, who have perceived it. I trust them fully, and therefore I have faith in it, even if my heart can't grasp it fully. And therefore we start with that conviction. Whereas belief is more mental in nature, and based on that faith, I can also construct my intellectual mindset in that fashion. Because the intellect is very versatile and plastic, and we can mold it the way we want. So if we want to mold it in light of our faith, we can do that, because the intellect can look at everything from many angles, including the angle from which faith looks at the truth. So that also the intellect is capable of doing. So the starting point may be that, but then we have to convert this faith and belief into knowledge which is more real to us. That is important if we have to live it, and on the other hand, living it is important for us to realize it. Knowledge becoming real, or the realization as it is called, essentially means that it becomes real to us, and as it becomes more and more real to us, we can organize our life around it. So how can we do it practically? So let's look at how we can progressively move towards a realization of horizontal unity and bringing it also into our daily lives. For that, most important is to engage with the world, not to try to run away from the world. As somebody put it very nicely, you can't translate it, कि you have the choice, या तो भाग लो या भाग लो. No, भाग लो means take part. Either take part, या भाग लो, run away from it. You have that. So not the second one, don't run away, participate in it. So engage with the world. Don't try to run away. Because the world is also a creation of the divine, a manifestation of the divine, another form of the same divine. And if it is imperfect, and the human being has been given that urge to perfect it, take it towards perfection rather than rejecting it. So don't reject the world as an illusion. Instead, seek to transform it so that it befits the one that it manifests. Now, one way you can do it is, it can be just developed as a sort of a habit. Whenever you see a group of people, so we are here, and it's easiest to do it in a place like this, because we have all come with a certain sort of a mindset, and the atmosphere strengthens that sort of an attitude. When you sit here, try and consider yourself a part of a larger whole, as if all the other individuals sitting in the hall are just different rays of the same sun. The source is one, but the rays are many, and it is just that, say 50 or 100 rays of that sun are present in this hall. Then you fit yourself as part of that, and you feel that you're one with the rest, and that is horizontal unity. When you actually engage with an individual, try to be as non-judgmental as possible. Do not judge the individual, because that again, brings that division in a non-judgmental fashion. So, any crowd whether it is here or elsewhere. Elsewhere it may take a little more effort, but whether it is the queue in the dining hall here, or whether it is in the marketplace, which is outside the ashram, there's no shortage of crowds. At least that is one problem we don't have in this country. Plenty of people everywhere, wherever you go. So that is an opportunity for us to see that oneness, that horizontal oneness. But then it's not only with people, it's also with plants, animals, and so on. So one can extend it also when you see a plant or an animal. And this may require a certain degree of silence of the mind, and that may come, say, during a walk. So when you're taking a walk, try to, instead of sort of trying to use that time to carry on a conversation on the phone, instead of that, just let your mind go into a state of relative silence so that you can observe the people and the plants and the animals and everything that you see as one with you. So that can take us towards that. So in a sense, you can say the walk can become a meditative walk. And what will be the result of the realization of this type of horizontal unity as we progress from where we are towards the ultimate realization of this unity? Because it's a process. It's a progressive comprehension. One of these will be that one will have a greater acceptance of the world as it is, and a sense of forgiveness if we observe anything wrong, a charitable view of others as well as ourselves. We learn to forgive others, and we also learn to forgive ourselves, realizing that we are all perfectly imperfect, although we may be differently imperfect. So one develops that. And then realizing that we are also imperfect and we are not really very different from others breeds a certain degree of humility. So acceptance of others, forgiving others and forgiving ourselves, and humility, these are the results of as this horizontal unity develops. What about the vertical unity? Now that requires a greater degree of inner and outer silence, and some people would like to feel that that can happen during meditation. Yes, it can happen, but at the same time some people can't meditate, but it doesn't mean that they cannot realize this. They can also realize it, because essentially what that meditation does is to achieve a relative state of inner silence, and that can happen when you're totally absorbed in anything which is relatively mechanical, repetitive, non-analytic, and that can again happen during a walk, or when you are looking at the ocean, looking at the sky, looking at the hills. Now any of these things can make us realize that there's something wonderful which is showing up in all these things, and I can relate to that wonderful entity which is showing through all this marvelous appearance of nature. So trying to look at nature which has been unspoilt by man, whether it is an ocean or whether it is which is vast and yet unspoilt, is itself something which can create that experience of oneness with that higher force, that higher entity which is the source of everything. Now what is the result of developing this type of a oneness, vertical oneness, that is feeling oneself as a part of that entity which is vast, undefinable, and behind all this magic and splendor? The result of this is, when you feel one with it, you have a sense of access to light and power of the divine. Light, which represents that total knowledge, and the power, the capacity to do everything. Once you have access to that light and power, you feel that you are, since you are one with it, you are supported, protected, you have a sense of security. But then that source not only has immense light and power, it also has infinite love. You feel one with that also. When you experience that love, you develop a sense of peace and comfort. And in fact, there is no other way of being completely at peace, feeling completely comfortable in this world. As Sri Aurobindo says in that little booklet, The Mother, a little but very powerful booklet, where he says, for being at peace, for walking through peacefully in this world which is full of peril and disaster, there are only two things which are necessary. Makes it look very simple. Only two things. Let me find out those two things, then I'll be always at peace, no matter how much danger and risk is there in the world. The world is full of peril and disaster. That Sri Aurobindo says, yes, it is. But then you can walk through it completely free of fear, completely at peace. And only two things are necessary. And then he further simplifies it. He says, on your part only one thing is necessary, the rest will follow. And what is that one thing that we need to do? Have faith, sincerity and surrender. Now you can have that faith, sincerity and surrender only through this vertical unity. So if you feel one with that, that is what gives that faith, that's what gives that sincerity, and that's what gives the surrender. Of course, sincerity is the key thing. If sincerity is not there, neither faith can be total nor surrender. So faith, sincerity and surrender. That's what we need. The rest will follow. What is it that will follow? The divine grace. The divine grace will automatically follow. So only two things are necessary: faith, sincerity and surrender on our part, and divine grace which goes with it. Now, both these can come if we look at the world, the material universe as it is, the creation, as another form of the same, as a part of the play of the divine. Why was the divine chosen to manifest in this imperfect, changing, inconstant world? It's a play, it's a game, Leela. So when we see that it is a game and we are a part of that game, it liberates us. It liberates us from the bondage. It liberates us from the sense of insecurity and fear in this world. It instead fills life with love because you feel one with others. It fills it with peace because you feel supported and loved by the highest. And that is what Sri Aurobindo says in one of his works, which is rather less known, which is in Sanskrit, his Upanishad. And he says that all this is a game of the divine. And once you realize that it's a game, it liberates you. Jnanad vimuktah kridate. Liberated by knowledge. Jnanad vimuktah. That is, once you are liberated by knowledge, one enjoys the play. You also start enjoying the play. Jnanad vimuktah kridate. You enjoy the play of the one who is playing it. He calls the divine Leelamaya. So you enjoy the play of the Leelamaya once you are liberated through knowledge. Now here Sri Aurobindo brings out that what we are seeking to do through this horizontal and vertical unity is actually what the divine itself is also doing all the time. Brahman preserves always its two terms of liberty within and of formation without. The fact that the divine chooses not to manifest so that it stays within itself is one type of liberty which it is using, and the other type of liberty is to put on a form without, that is to acquire an outer form. That also is a freedom of the divine. The Brahman preserves always its two terms of liberty within and of formation without, of expression and of freedom from the expression. That is, it's making use of its liberty, full liberty, it's to express and not to express. We also being that, since we are also the same, that divine, can attain to the same divine self-possession. The harmony of the two tendencies is the condition of all life that aims at being really divine. So harmonizing the two tendencies, that is to be within and to be without, to engage with what is inside and what is outside, to engage with what does not manifest like the soul, which is hidden, and to engage with what is outside. To harmonize these two tendencies is at the root of all divine life. Liberty pursued by exclusion of the thing exceeded leads along the path of negation. So, if we try to pursue our liberty by excluding that which we exceed, so we are trying to exceed the material manifestation and then we exclude it. So, that leads to a negation of that what we exceed, and therefore that leads to a refusal of that which God has accepted. God has accepted this imperfect manifestation as another form of itself, and we negate it in the process of trying to exceed it. So, liberty pursued by exclusion of the thing exceeded leads along the path of negation to the refusal of that which God has accepted. Activity pursued by absorption in the act and the energy leads to an inferior affirmation and the denial of the highest. On the other hand, being active, but then being so totally absorbed in the outer action and energy that we forget what is behind it, the unseen hand behind it, ends up denying the highest. So that leads to the denial of the highest, which is in fact the unseen hand behind the activity. But what God combines and synthesizes both its inactive form and its active form, the kshara and the akshara. That is the one which diminishes, the one which is active, the one is subject to change, and the akshara which is constant. So God has combined both in itself. But what God combines and synthesizes, wherefore should man insist on divorcing? Who are we to divorce the two? To be perfect as he is perfect is the condition of his integral attainment. So, means to try and put on his nature, the nature of the divine, who is perfect, perfectly harmonized in both its aspects, is what also is our integral, that is total attainment. Now, this is a little complex, but then in Savitri, he puts it in a relatively simple manner, and so does he in his Upanishad. So, I'll turn to some of that. In Savitri, Book 1, Canto 4, which actually is that canto, Book 1, Canto 4 of Savitri, essentially a summary of the life divine. A poetic summary and a summary without the type of rationalization which Aurobindo goes into in the life divine. But essentially, the knowledge is the same, and that's why Book 1, Canto 4 is titled The Secret Knowledge, because this is knowledge which is normally hidden from our ordinary experience. So, in these lines he says, all-knowing, he accepts our darkened state. So, look at the humility of the divine and the type of play it engages in. All-knowing, it knows everything, but at the same time, he assumes a form which appears ignorant. Ignorance is synonymous with darkness, so all-knowing, he accepts our darkened state. He accepts also to be manifest in a form which is darkened. Divine wears shapes of animal or man. So, it is the formless divine, but it puts on shapes of animal or man. Eternal, he ascends to fate and time. It's eternal, everlasting, but accepts the limitations of time. Immortal, dallies with mortality. So, it freely mixes with mortality in spite of being immortal. So, that is the type of game it is playing. And in the Upanishad, Sri Aurobindo says in his Upanishad, Jnanasya krida ajnanam. So, the krida of the one who has jnana, that is the one who has total knowledge, its play is full of ajnana. So, the ignorance is actually play of the one who has all the knowledge. Jnanasya krida ajnanam, shakte krida dorbalyam. The one who has all the strength behaves as if he is durbal, weak. So, weakness, apparent weakness of the creation, of the manifestation, is actually a play of the one who is all powerful. And niranandam, anandasya krida. The one who is ananda, imperturbable, constant, perpetual bliss. he puts on the appearance of lacking it, being unhappy, so creating that duality of joy and sorrow. So beautiful, expressions, and the Sanskrit has its own charm. Jnanasya krida jnanam, shakte krida dorbalyam, niranandam anandasya krida. So all this is play. But then the divine has accepted all these things, putting on this form of ignorance, form of animal or man, being mortal in spite of being immortal. So that in a way sort of is something which binds us to a debt. That's what she says in Savitri. A mutual debt binds man to the Supreme. His nature we must put on as he put ours. He has put on this nature of ignorance and mortality, but that binds us to that debt. We have to put on that. We means as human beings, because animals are not probably bound by that type of an obligation. But since human being has been given that urge to go beyond his ordinary imperfect human state, becomes a debt that we have to discharge. A mutual debt binds man to the Supreme. His nature we must put on as he put ours. We are sons of God and must be even as he. His human portion we must grow divine. The human portion, the imperfect form, that is our human portion, but potentially that is also potentially divine because it's a manifestation of the divine, that we must grow divine. A mutual debt binds man to the Supreme. His nature we must put on as he put ours. We are sons of God and must be even as he. His human portion we must grow divine. And the same thing he says in his Upanishad, that we are Anandasya Putra. We are the sons of bliss, the one who is all Ananda. And therefore we should manifest that. Anandasya Putra, and that we should manifest that Ananda, he says, Ananda Prakashatam. Prakashatam, let's manifest it. So we are all Anandasya Putra. But then we have to have the aspiration and do our bit towards manifesting it. Anandasya Putra, Ananda Prakashatam. And for that, I think I can end with Sri Aurobindo's Gayatri. What we need is to do is to meditate on that supreme light which can show us this whole truth, the whole truth which harmonizes the unmanifest and the manifest into one indivisible entity. Om Tat Savitur Varam Rupam Jyotih Parasya Dhimahi Yanna Satyena Deepayet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.